Chapter 561. It's about the leader of those guys, the one they call Sage. I heard he used to live in the capital. Sage? Enon's interest was enough to indicate that this was no ordinary news, but this was truly unexpected. Yes, he was a manager. Manager? Yuder recalled the visage of the sage he had glimpsed briefly. The sage that Yuder knew from his previous life was unlike the genuine sage of this era, who looked like a kind-hearted middle-aged man. With a neatly kept beard and clear complexion, he didn't look like someone who had struggled in life. But to think he was a manager in the capital, it was hard to believe. Are you sure you didn't mistake him for someone else? The information comes from someone I worked with in the intelligence guild. He mainly deals with lower level managers, but his memory for people is exceptional. Yuder's expression shifted. A slight nod conveyed the implicit request for more information. It was an attitude that seemed slightly arrogant, but also entirely natural for someone long accustomed to leadership. Indeed, Enon had sensed this about him from the start. That guy said there was a manager who had worked for a long time in the Blue Crown. 2 years ago, he suddenly cleared out his home and disappeared in the dead of night. It caused quite a stir, and he said that the sage had a striking resemblance to that manager. Vanished in the dead of night? Yes, back then it wasn't uncommon for people to disappear like that, but it was the first time for someone from the Blue Crown. That's why he remembered it so well. People disappear like that occasionally? Why? Yuder suddenly recalled the time frame and understood the reason. Enon gave a sly smile. Yes, you would know the reason better than anyone. While it wasn't particularly relevant to Yuder, who had been living alone in the mountains, there had been an atmosphere of fear and suspicion towards the newly emerging awakeners at that time. The chaos had somewhat subsided after announcements were made about the Red Stone, but there were still many awakeners who had fled their hometowns. It was a fact evident even from the awakener Yuder had met, such as those from the Star of Nagran. So, the theory is that the manager who disappeared might have become an awakener and fled? Yuder had not known that even in the capital, where the Emperor's reach was closest, there were such individuals. However, it made sense if they had awakened before the announcements about the Red Stone and the awakeners had begun. Yes, so I did some more digging. And what did you find? Here, take a look. Yuder unfolded the parched paper handed to him by Enon. It contained the personal details of some managers who had worked at the Blue Crown. A red stamp in the corner indicated that it was a discarded document. The ink and paper are definitely the ones exclusively used by managers. It's neither duplicated nor a copy. This is the original. It was a mystery how Enon had managed to find a document that must have been buried somewhere for years. How did you manage to get your hands on this? Isn't this what they dragged me into their intelligence department for? I knew that, but I'm asking because it's impressively done. Enough with the compliments, just read it already. Enon's reply was curt, but Yuder noticed the slight grin tugging at the corners of Enon's mouth and eyes, failing to hide his sense of satisfaction. The name written on the document was Carl Enfile. He was a level 8 administrator who had worked in the Blue Crown, responsible for library management and temple communications. If he were still alive today, he would be in his late 50s. The age seems about right, Yuder thought. According to the documents, Carl Enfile led a fairly average life for a lower-level administrator. Born into an obscure family with little reputation, he became an administrator solely on the basis of his surname, without any titles to speak of. He was an administrator for over 30 years and remained a level 8. That probably means he hardly got any promotions. Did he have a family? Yuder wondered. There was no mention of a spouse or children in his family details. He had lived alone in the 6th Wall district, led an unremarkable administrative life, neither making any significant contributions nor committing any offenses. Then, nearly 3 years ago, he vanished without a trace. That was the end of it. But that doesn't mean there is absolutely no information to be gained about him, Yuder mused. Even if Carl Enfile had disappeared, there would be those who still remembered him. Digging deeper could reveal more. Enon seemed to be thinking along the same lines and added, "From what I have gathered so far, Carl Enfile had quite an extensive social network. He was knowledgeable and often consulted by others. When working with the temple, he frequently gave doctrinal lectures on behalf of the priests." Either interpreted this in his own way. So, he was well read and persuasive. Why didn't he get promoted then? He may have been pushed out during power struggles. The documents don't mention it, but the Blue Crown is one of those places where those who lose out in the internal politics end up, Enon explained. So this socially adept guy was also actively involved in power struggles, Yudir contemplated. It wasn't particularly surprising. There were plenty of people who appeared good from a distance but were not so upon closer examination. Yudir had visited the Blue Crown when he applied for the cavalry test. It was primarily a workplace for lower level administrators. Such positions offered the best career path for people born with some but not significant advantage, although the internal atmosphere was often thick with ambition. Yudir had sensed it when he was there to register for the test. There were more people interested in protecting their own comfort than in actually doing their jobs. What's strange is that, besides the guy who mentioned remembering Carl's face, almost no one else remembers him. The guy who gave me the information said that Carl's disappearance was quite the topic at the time, but no one remembers it now, not even his name, Enon added. It seemed that Enon had gone to great lengths to find documents proving Carl Enfile's existence precisely for that reason. It was strange for everyone to so uniformly forget someone without a reason. Either knew of one explanation for such an occurrence. The likelihood that a psychic was involved is high, Either posited. Exactly, that's why I went to dig deeper. In that case, give me a list of people who claim they can't remember. Why? If it really is the work of a psychic, then from that point on, it's my responsibility. Do you have a way to restore their memories? Enon asked spectacally. Either quietly replied, that would also be the work of a psychic, and there is no one who understands that power better than I do. Even if one's psychic abilities seemed formidable, they were never absolute, just as Nahan's illusionary abilities had their weaknesses. Even if these forces were invisible, as long as the same energy was being used, there was always a way to block or break it. Among mages, it was rare to be bested by magic, and sword masters seldom lost to other swordsmen. The principle was the same. Enon briefly furrowed his brows before reaching out and firmly grabbing Yuder's cheek. Why are you doing this? Quiet. No showing off just because you think your powers are so great, especially not when you're bleeding all over and had to be carried here. What are you talking about? Just know this. No showing off, no acting cool. Because of people like you, we increasingly get patients who overextend themselves and have to be bought in. Annoyed for some unfathomable reason, Enon began to mutter. I will pass you the list later. You find out exactly what abilities Sage and the others possess. Even my own investigations have their limits. Understood. Yudir was aware, thanks to the information Kishir had provided, that the Awakeners from the Star of Nagran were currently staying in the Bright Palace of Crown Prince for a few days. So the next meeting is as good as set. I hope Kyol has been doing a good job investigating them. By the way, what happened with your commander? Having finished their conversation and about to clear the tableware, Enon suddenly asked as if he had just remembered something. He seemed reluctant but inescapable in his inquiry. Why? This morning, he came looking for Luzon and asked if he could give him some divine energy for rejuvenation. Kishir asked for that? Since the day the emperor awakened, Kishir had been focusing on recovery alongside Yuder. He had his condition diagnosed by Anon at Yuder's request and had mostly stayed by Yuder's side when he wasn't taking medicine or sleeping in his own room. His diligent and attentive caregiving was still fresh in Yuder's memory. Though he had mentioned going to see the emperor this morning, Yuder hadn't noticed anything odd then. Rejuvenation, huh? At face value, it might just be that Kishir wanted to appear healthier when going to see the emperor. But if there was another reason, it was Yuder, who had declined Enon's offer to rest in the room next to Kishir, opting to rest in his own room instead. But after hearing Enon's words, he began to think he should have stayed by Kishir's side, regardless of how others might perceive it. Got it. Thanks for letting me know.